The story begins in the city of Sihai, on the Master Division platform, when suddenly someone shouts, questioning what was wrong with her. A blue-haired girl then comments on how he dares to mock her and her sister. He apologizes but explains that the two possess the worst requirement for sect disciples. The girl shouts, saying that she and her sister were at level 3 of the martial arts realm, questioning if he still wanted to recruit talents. Her sister, irritated, says they became disciples just 3 days ago and questions why he had to expel them from the sect. While the two insult him, a small group nearby notices that he wasn't accepting anyone. Despite the sect being in ruins and having only one person, the MC, eating, sighs, and asks what he could do, as these were the rules, and those who failed were expelled. The first patriarch of the sect was the strongest in this world, and it was inevitable that someone would try to deceive him to enter the sect. The sisters, furious, ask if he still dreams of recruiting geniuses, and question who would accept such terms, deciding to leave. He replies that these were the rules of the old man who was already dead, but he warned them not to try. However, they watched. One of the sisters shouts, calling him a pervert, telling him not to make excuses, as he hadn't recruited a single disciple, and that the Wuji sect would fall with someone like him. He becomes furious and shouts that he was tired of it, that he didn't want to be this crappy patriarch, and that he wanted to return to Earth and be a game tester again. 3 months earlier, on the western border, at the human defenses against the demon army, the MC, alongside someone, questions what was happening, as he was working at the company testing the skills of the new profession, Sword Emperor, and asks why he appeared in that strange place. An old man tells him to forget about it and asks what he just used, referring to the attack he used to cut the massive demon in half. He asks what kind of sorcery could achieve that. The MC says it wasn't sorcery, and after splitting the ground with just one strike all the way to a mountain, he says it was the Great Sword, intermediate skill heaven-splitting sword, max level 100. However, the attack was so strong it left a massive gash on the planet. The old man is surprised and says that legends truly speak of people falling from the sky as both gods and demons, but he remembers the demon army nearby and asks him to be careful. The MC replies that Xiao-san was already taking care of them, and after summoning a massive 3-headed dragon, he begins to annihilate the enemy army with its flames. The demons flee in panic, saying not to use that anymore as it seemed like the end of the world. Suddenly, the MC realizes something and says that it was a test account that had all max-level skills from every profession, and it seems he absorbed it when he came there. The old man wonders what this test account is, and he explains that the GM account he used at the company was a test account with all professions at max level: cultivator, assassin, mage, archer, and swordsman, all at level 100. The old man looks at him, thinking he's a freak, saying he didn't care about the details anymore, as frankly, if he hadn't found him earlier, he would have been devoured by the demons. He asks him to be grateful when suddenly the MC punches him on the head and shouts, saying, "Screw this," that he couldn't force him to join a finished sect with just him. The old man, desolate, responds that if he wanted to refuse being the patriarch, he could, but only if the sect returned to number 1 again, or if he managed to find 7 true disciples. He thinks that he was in a different world and inherited a broken sect that wasn't even in the top 100 of Sihai City's ranking, and the old man left him alone to face this mess. In the present, while walking on the Master Division platform, he hears other masters shouting that their sect needs younger sisters and that they offer accommodations and food. He thinks it was so noisy that he couldn't recruit anyone today and would just return to his mansion. Suddenly, 2 men are captivated by a beautiful group of fairies descending from the sky and comment that they came from the Eternal Sword Gate. After they walk through the city, one man says that everyone from the Eternal Sword Gate is a genius and that Ling Ruoshui was known as the Young Sword Goddess. 3 months ago, the Eternal Sword Peak collapsed due to the impact of a meteor, and the sect had vanished since then. The MC hears 2 men conversing that they were looking for a sect, but the other man doesn't believe it because they were too proud. He becomes confused about the Eternal Sword Peak and wonders if it was that mountain that looked like a sword. He remembers that he had just arrived in this world and was testing his abilities. After using an advanced mage ability, Falling Star, he accidentally destroyed the sword-shaped mountain. Before the situation worsened, he would simply disappear and leave the homeless girls to their fate. One of them tells her sister that there are quite a few people there. Ling comments to wait and see. Yang thinks it's better to leave. Several men fall for the girls and shout, asking if they have no place to go. They should join their sects, as they would be the best. The blue-haired girl becomes apprehensive upon seeing her sister grab the sword. Ling, indignant, comments that it is not for them to choose the girls, and that if the sects intend to recruit them, they should send their representatives. Quickly, several men present themselves as sect representatives and comment that the eldest sister of the Eternal Sword sect is truly dominant. As the MC retreats, the eldest sister notices, and thinking, wonders if he wasn't interested in them, and questions if they weren't worthy of his attention. Unlike the others, he seemed special, and she wonders if he could be a genius. Suddenly, someone shouts that no one would choose anyone, that no one would move or leave. A muscular man comments that they, from the Sungate sect, would take the girls, calling everyone trash, and suddenly calls the MC back. Yang, thinking, wonders if he should ignore it, but remembers the old man had told him to leave a good impression as a sect leader in front of others. Turning around, he questions what the man wants. The muscular man, enraged, asks if he knows nothing about hierarchy, stating that he would take the girls and telling no one to leave. Then, he asks the girls if they're okay, claiming he will teach the MC a lesson. They look confused, and one of them asks who that big idiot is. In the crowd, the muscular man says he will let the MC throw 3 punches, and if he moves an inch, he will have the qualification to leave. The MC feels awkward and says the man lost part of his brain, questioning if he has a problem. The muscular man becomes furious, and Ling quickly notices something. The muscular man leaps and shouts, asking if he wants to die. Yang sighs and, as the man approaches using his fist ability, simply throws a punch, commenting that it should be enough for someone like him. After their fists collide, the muscular man is horrified to realize his attack failed, and he is suddenly hurled into a massive wall. After receiving the maximum level 100 furious punch, he is utterly wrecked. The MC is shocked, realizing he may have overdone it, wondering if the man died. The other men are terrified, saying it's impossible and questioning how a sect could have such a strong patriarch, asking if Wuji wasn't a sword-specialized sect. They wonder where that technique came from. Another man comments that if that punch had hit him, there wouldn't be anything left of him to tell the tale. As the MC retreats, he waves and comments that 1 punch was enough, and that Lord Lai should forget about the other 2. Ling realizes that he was extremely strong. Suddenly, someone comments that the MC was very handsome. Then, a girl with pink hair, infatuated, says that the way he walks, fights, and looks around has captured her heart. The girl with blue hair notices she has heard this before but wonders where. Her older sister thinks he was special, different from the other sects that wanted to recruit them. He was so well hidden, with a low presence, that he must be extremely powerful, a legendary hermit, and that they should join his sect. Suddenly, someone calls the MC, asking him to wait a moment. He feels confused and, looking back with a smile, replies, "How can I help you?" They rush closer, and Ling comments that she wanted to ask him a favor. He thinks he must act naturally and should not panic. The other men become outraged and comment that it was just a punch, that he only knew how to punch, and that they shouldn't be fooled, letting that idiot deceive them, as it was absurd for the fairies to want to join such a lousy sect. The older sister asks if they could join the Wuji sect. He coughs and questions what they knew about his sect since they wanted to join it. She replies that she didn't know anything but that he seemed very trustworthy. He tells her to stop that because she doesn't even know him and already thinks he's trustworthy, stating that she was being too hasty. She tries to argue, but he doesn't let her, and says she didn't need to say anything else because he already knew there was no fate binding them and that there is no forced happiness. They should follow their own paths and just be friends. They feel embarrassed and the other men shout, insulting him and questioning how he dared to reject them. Ling Ruok Shui, of the new generation of swordswomen, was known as the most prominent swordswoman of the new generation. An enraged man punches his brother in the head and shouts that every sect wanted her, but that bastard from the Wuji sect just rejected them, questioning if he was crazy. His brother asks him to calm down. Ling comments that she was at level 9 of the spiritual realm and that all her sisters were at level 6 of the martial realm, hoping he would reconsider. He shows no interest and says that even though they were qualified, the sect was full this year and would gladly wait for them next year. A man shouts, questioning, and says that the year had just begun, and that the most important thing is that he is the only one in the Wuji sect. He waves and with a smile, comments that he didn't need to explain anything to NPCs who would appear again and bids farewell to the sisters. Ling shouts for him to wait, but with incredible speed, he disappears. The men are confused and question where he ran off to. He hides in a nearby building and thinks he finally got rid of them, watching them from a distance. However, he comments that he had a pain in the butt. The pink-haired girl is impressed and says he really was very attractive and disappeared in an instant. However, one of the sisters notices and comments that little Xiaoru was acting like a nymphomaniac again, questioning what they planned to do now and whether they would look for other sects. Xiaoru says she didn't want another, she wanted him. Ling, smiling, comments that they wouldn't look for another sect because the patriarch was an extraordinary person and that he wouldn't give them such an obvious answer. He must be testing them. The little one, enchanted, agrees, saying that must be it. Her sister places her hand on her head and, smiling, says they would pass his test. She thinks that after the destruction of the sect, they don't suffer for anything. She remembers it was a miserable journey and that they never bowed their heads to their oppressors. During a storm, they fought against a massive group, and while she was all injured, they questioned if that was all a genius possessed. She, panting, charges at them with her sword, saying she wouldn't accept defeat, and she thinks, how could she give up? Slashing multiple blades, she continues to think that she would never retreat and that they should stay away from her sisters. The enemy group starts screaming in pain after receiving the attacks. She, trembling, tries to walk with the help of her sword, but loses consciousness and falls to the ground. Her sisters, desperate, run to help her and ask what was happening. Back in the present, she thinks it didn't matter because she would never give up and says she would accept the test. Shiaru celebrates and says that surely they would pass this test to enter the Wuji sect. They all scream. The MC, hiding, becomes desperate and thinks they should leave him alone. Sometime later, the MC, after flying, says he was finally back and that it was very exhausting. On a walkway, he comments that the sect was built in a very isolated place, full of holes. Upon reaching the sect gate, he becomes indignant because every time he saw it, he couldn't hold back and ended up breaking it. For this reason, he was all worn out and thinks the biggest headache was opening that gate upon returning because it was very big and heavy and he couldn't use normal strength. He remembers that the last time he used his palm technique, the old man almost scolded him to death. He says the only way was to jump over that wall like a thief. Looking at a small village, he comments that it was somewhat lonely living in such a large place alone. After jumping the gate and walking through the streets, he notices they were empty as always but senses something in an alley and comments that she was doing her old tricks again, but needed to improve. Upon arriving at the demon prison and forcefully opening the doors, a demon locked in a room shouts for everyone to be careful because the dragon lunatic had returned and seemed angry. Perhaps he had failed to recruit new disciples again. Suddenly, he stops in front of a cell and tells the prisoner to save her energy because her fox cries wouldn't fool anyone, since he was the only human there. Suddenly, a voice asks if he wouldn't like to eat or drink with her because she didn't want food, only to get out of there. A small demon whining says it was very boring being locked up there. He questions why she didn't think about the number of people she hurt before being imprisoned. After she draws several ways to kill him, she comments that she reflected on it and says he couldn't even sustain her anymore, questioning why he didn't let her go. He grabs one of the biscuits and says he couldn't do that because he promised the old man he wouldn't let her escape. With tears in her eyes, she stays quiet, and after eating the biscuit, he tells her not to waste the whole day thinking about how to escape the prison because there was nothing interesting outside. He asks if free food wasn't a good thing. She, annoyed, says humans seem better than this food and proposes that if he let her out, she would marry him. The MC, sitting on the ground, asks the fox if he looked that stupid because he wasn't a fool. She calls him an idiot and invites him to run away together, saying they would have many children and that she had even thought of some names. She promises that if he freed her in 3 years, she could make him a first-class master. He tells her to stop with those tricks and asks if she wanted him to believe that the nine-tailed demon queen, who once destroyed an entire dynasty, no longer intended to harm humans. Standing up, he asks her to stay quiet and behave for the rest of her life, and leaves. A small explosion occurs, and the nine-tailed demon queen returns to her original form, calling him a stupid human. She laughs, saying it was very funny that the old man saved him only once, and asks why he wants to spend the rest of his life with them. He replies that she was wrong because he accepted inheriting that sect, not because the old man saved him, but because he respected his words. He had witnessed his true courage and determination and decided to revive the clan, even if it put his life at risk. For this reason, he, who came from another world with nothing, decided to follow the old man's path and put the sect back on the map. She stays quiet after hearing his words, transforms back into a fox, and asks if he wouldn't release her. Sulking, she comments that if he doesn't release her, she will leave on her own, and as a result, he will die. The next day, upon waking in his bed, he remarks that it was already morning and that he was still sleepy. However, he notices how nice the weather was and decides to sleep a little longer. A mysterious voice then questions how, with such an attitude, the Wuji sect could return to its former glory. The MC, lying in his bed, listens carefully. The voice continues, saying that he should pay attention to his manners. Then, a bird comments that the sect has been under his control for some time. The MC asks how he could restore the sect's glory without a good night's sleep, and argues that the bird was merely a creature he picked up along the way, of unknown origin, and therefore should mind its own business. The bird retorts that in that case, it would no longer manage the sect's finances for him, and that the MC would have to learn the sect's rules on his own. Today would be the day it leaves. Yang, smiling, remarks that he was wrong, and that this world is full of birds with mysterious origins. The bird replies that at least he knew how to admit when he was wrong, but should remember that they had a business relationship, and that it would only act as his steward for 3 years. Afterward, it would grant him a single wish. He nods in agreement. The bird continues, telling him to get up and greet the visitors. The MC is shocked and comments that he couldn't even see a ghost in that ruined sect, and questions how they could possibly have visitors now. The bird responds that there was a group of beautiful girls outside the mountain, near the gate, shouting to be let into that stupid sect. He panics, thinking they had indeed come and that he was cursed with bad luck. He comments that his eyes felt heavy and he couldn't keep them open, so he wouldn't be able to meet the visitors. The bird remarks that he was looking for disciples, and it seemed a bit suspicious that he didn't get excited when it was a girl present. He ignores the bird, lies back down in bed, and says he was sleeping. The bird, irritated, tells him to do whatever he wants and flies off. The MC thinks they will leave as long as he ignores them. The girls walk toward the gate, and Ling thinks they won't give up until he shows himself. After some time, he appears at the top of the gate. They notice his presence, and the eldest sister asks him to at least listen to them. Sometime earlier, one of the sisters, exhausted, commented that she had been kneeling for over a day and that since the patriarch hadn't come, it meant he didn't want them. While observing them, without them noticing and eating something, he thinks that finally someone gave up. Ling says he is an extraordinary person and that there must be many trials to become his disciple, so they should persevere and not succumb to their weaknesses. The younger sister remains calm, waiting for the MC. He, pensive, wonders if they will stay kneeling for the rest of their lives. After eating a biscuit, he decides to forget about it and flies off to sleep again. That night, it begins to rain. The bird comments that it's raining heavily. He responds that he knows, but since they practice martial arts, a bit of rain wouldn't hurt them, and the bird shouldn't worry about them. The bird falls silent. Yang thinks they are too persistent, and that he needs to find a way to get rid of them. Thinking so much gives him a headache. In front of the gate, they remain kneeling under the rain. Even with loud thunder, they don't waver and continue waiting. However, in the morning, after the rain stops, Ling is completely soaked with a sad expression. One of the sisters, shivering as the wind hits her, thinks it was a terrible time for rain and comments on how cold it was, while the eldest sister begins to worry. The MC, watching from a distance, wonders why they still haven't left but decides to let it go, thinking that what the eyes don't see, the heart doesn't feel, and that everything has its time. Suddenly, he and Ling sense something coming from the forest. The MC feels a murderous intent. The older sister quickly calls the others to leave, as they would be risking too much by entering this ruined sect. The sisters are confused, but a mysterious person with 2 swords comments that he has finally found them. They are shocked to realize that the demon has followed them and that he would not let them go. Ling quickly stands up, draws her sword, and states that since he is there, she will be his opponent. The demon says that's perfect, because the remaining members of the Eternal Sword Gate have come to join the Wuji sect. He questions whether they truly believed that a broken sect like this could protect them from him, as he would simply destroy it. The sisters realize the situation is critical and ask Ling to be careful. She responds that destroying a sect is a bold statement, and that besides, the Wuji sect had not accepted them. Moreover, due to the 9 secrets of the sword, the demon had killed many innocent people, leading their master to ruin one of his eyes. Now that the Eternal Sword Gate was in trouble, he came to cause more problems. That's why they decided to move elsewhere and should not fight on the Wuji sect's territory. The demon draws one of his swords and declares they won't go anywhere, stating that each of them would surrender one of their eyes, but they need not worry, as the cut would be quick and they wouldn't feel much pain. He then begins to imbue lightning into his sword. Ling remarks that the master was very kind to leave him with one eye, and yet he continues causing trouble. She leaps to attack him, declaring that now it's her turn to deal with him and finish what her master started by destroying his other eye. With that, she attacks him with a blade strike, but he manages to dodge. Smiling, he says she is indeed strong, as expected of the young sword goddess, but claims they are not on the same level since he is in a superior realm. She attempts to hit him again, commenting that no one knows who has won or lost, delivering another blade strike. With a leap, he dodges but notices her closing in and defends another attack. After fending off several blows, he questions if no one really knows the final outcome of this fight. The sisters begin cheering for Ling. As she delivers another blade strike, Ling notices something strange and desperately executes another attack. However, the demon evades the massive strike that destroys several trees and reappears atop one of the trunks, commenting that it wasn't bad and that she is far more interesting than he had imagined. She remains silent, glaring at him with a sinister aura. He continues, warning her to be careful because now it's his turn to attack. In a matter of seconds, he vanishes and appears behind her, leaving her shocked, and with extreme ease, cuts her. The sisters are terrified. She manages to distance herself from him, clutching her wounded shoulder, and calls him a coward. In pain, She remarks that she would continue, but her body begins trembling. The sisters notice this and rush toward her, but she yells at them to stay away and questions what she had said earlier, that when they encountered this demon she would face him. While they hesitate, she shouts for them to leave as quickly as possible. The sisters are in shock, and she continues, insisting they shouldn't underestimate her because she has a plan, and they must not interfere. The demon, mocking, asks if she still wants to fight, claiming that with such mediocre talent, even if he gave her a year to train, she wouldn't achieve much. Smiling, he says it's impossible. Ling then begins using a new ability, stating she doesn't need more time. Emanating enormous energy around her sword, she invokes the technique, Fall of the Heavens. The sisters scream for her not to use that move, but the sword becomes enormous, and Ling shouts for the demon to witness his end. The demon is shocked at the size of the sword, and with a finger movement, she invokes Eternal Sword, causing the colossal blade to spin in the air and within seconds, strike the demon. He tries to block, but she uses all her strength, causing an explosion that hurls him away, destroying the surrounding forest. The sword spins and falls beside her. Ling, trembling and leaning on the sword, questions if the attack worked. He starts coughing, and the sisters, desperate, rush to help her stand, asking if she was okay and saying everything would be fine. Suddenly, a voice echoes, saying that was surprising, and they realize the demon didn't die from the attack. Behind a curtain of smoke, he continues, saying the intensity of the attack showed she truly wasn't ready to use that technique, and it was a pity since she only hurt herself. With a trembling voice, Ling calls him a bastard. The demon, moving at an absurd speed, appears beside them and comments that he will change what he said earlier to avoid future issues. Now, he didn't just want one eye. With a malicious gaze, he shouts that he wanted them all dead. Quickly, Ling pushes one of the sisters and shouts for everyone to get away. The demon advances, saying the game would begin, launching several slashes. The sisters step in front, shouting they would protect their elder sister. Ling, battered, remarks that they were so foolish and there was no need to protect her. With a leap, she charges at the demon and yells for them to flee. He notices she's without her sword, and with a smile comments that no one in this world has stopped his blade with bare hands. It seemed she was desperate, and if so, he would cut her hands along with her body. As the demon prepares to kill her, Ling shouts for her sisters to run for their lives. The demon's blade is about to cut her hand when suddenly the attack fails. He is stunned to realize that the MC, flying, pulled her away at the last second, embracing her to protect her. The sisters are shocked to see the Lord. The demon, enraged, questions how a master of a ruined sect dared meddle in others' affairs. Yang asks what gave him the courage to cause trouble here and, with a malicious smile, comments that he didn't value his own life. The demon responds that he would also die with them. The MC is surprised by the demon's audacity. Suddenly, the enemy advances, stating that since there was no escape, they would all vanish together. He attacks with his sword, but Yang raises his hand. The demon, mocking, comments that another fool was trying to catch his blade with bare hands. The MC, smiling, shows 2 fingers and says he's mistaken. With a single movement, he blocks the attack using only 2 fingers. The demon is shocked, incredulous, and begins to insult Yang, who uses the technique, martial arts reversal, bare hands grasp, maximum level 100. With it, he breaks the sword and remarks that 2 fingers were enough. The demon, desperate, declares that was his most powerful sword and that everyone should head to hell. In a swift motion, he draws another sword, but the MC uses another technique, pulling Ling's sword with primary swordsman skill. With a powerful strike, he delivers the attack, single slash, maximum level 100. The demon is split in half with a single blow. The sisters are left speechless by the attack. As the demon's body falls to the ground, the MC lands, driving the sword into the earth. He sets Ling down while the sisters rush toward her. Ling, enchanted, watches him as the sisters call to her, and Yang departs. She watches him walk away, wondering to herself if there are people in this world who are perfect with both swords and fists. Suddenly, he hears them thanking him for saving their lives and pleading for him to accept them, saying they would do their best to restore the sect Wuji's former glory. They begin to beg, and he responds that since they are so determined and already know the sect's current situation, he will grant them a test in 3 days so they can become disciples of the sect. And if they failed, they should withdraw and never return. Ling comments that they would pass and definitely stay there. The other sisters are delighted to see that the patriarch accepted. Suddenly, the MC calls the eldest sister. She and her sister are confused, but she walks toward him. He raises his finger and uses the skill, Healer, heal scars maximum level, 100. A massive energy falls over her, and within seconds, she is uninjured. The sisters question what kind of technique that was, as the eldest sister's wounds were healed instantly. They ask if he is a spiritual healer, but one of the sisters starts to suspect him. Ling is astonished to realize that her body's wounds were healed instantly, and even the old ones disappeared. Yang, shocked, thinks that even a small healing spell was overpowered and that maximum level skills were insane. She kneels and thanks him for saving her life. He coughs and asks her to stand. The sisters become excited and cheer. Then they all walk toward the sect gate. Upon arriving, one of the sisters says the gate is incredible and asks how something so massive could be opened. He then focuses energy in his hand and with a single movement opens the gate, creating a small gust of wind and inviting them inside. Once they enter, they are impressed by the size of the city. The next morning, the MC on top of one of the houses questions why he had to wake up so early. Happy tells him to look at how hard the girls were working and says that only someone heartless would want to get rid of them. He asks the MC to observe Ling, as she had been practicing for a long time. Yang comments that he thought she was just sleeping. The bird says she truly deserves the title of sword goddess. The MC questions if he isn't exaggerating. Happy wonders if dedicating oneself to the sword makes people lose interest in the opposite sex. The MC notices there were only 8 of them and asks where the others were. Happy replies that they were there, working hard since early morning, and asks if he remembers their names. He mentions that the big one was Shu, the idiotic leader obsessed with training, who reflected on why she would get angry while training. Then, the girl hanging clothes says she wouldn't let anyone hold her sister's hand. Her name was Lai Lai, who called herself Ling's one and only true fan. The small one, questioning whether she should clean the patriarch's room because men tend to leave them messy, was named Jiaru. Another sister, who was sewing, was called Mu Xin and had a fear of men. She comments that her teacher said all men were beasts. The other sister helping with the sewing was named Xiong, a housewife who loved cosplay, and with a smile questioned what could be more fun than cosplay. Lastly, the last of the sisters, kneeling and holding her sword, was Lu Qing, the strange girl wondering if the Lord had forgotten her. The MC stands and comments that he has made up his mind, leaving Happy confused. He says he would clean his room and watch the girls in the darkness, looking for a mistake to get rid of them. The bird questions if they had done something wrong and why he was so desperate to get rid of them. Sometime later, while sewing, Mu Xin asks if they thought the patriarch was trustworthy. Xiong responds that he was very strong and also seemed a bit virtuous, so they should trust the eldest sister's choice. Mu Xin questions the possibility of him spying on them, as men were dangerous creatures. Another sister tells her not to say such nonsense, as the patriarch was a good and honorable man. While observing them, the MC thinks she is right, as he was watching, not spying. Elsewhere in the village, Su Shu is chopping wood and says she is very tired. The MC notices that she is chopping wood without using qi, but perhaps she is doing it to grow stronger. Suddenly, one of the sisters decides to clean another area, and upon opening the door, she coughs as it's full of dust. Mu Xin, holding a cloth, comments that the patriarch wasn't a serious person since he seemed somewhat careless. As she wipes down the fighting arena, she notices something and suddenly screams that the floor was collapsing, calling for help. Yang quickly realizes something has happened and with incredible speed begins rushing through the houses. As soon as he arrives, he runs toward the hole while the other sisters scream, warning that she fell and telling her not to be afraid since the patriarch was on his way, assuring her she would be fine. The MC begins jumping along the walls of the hole to increase his speed, and he manages to catch her. Using his skill, he begins descending slowly, landing on the ground. Noticing she was trembling, he comments that everything was fine and that the little flower didn't need to be scared. She says her name isn't Little Flower and that her teacher told her men are evil creatures, demanding that he let her go immediately and not take advantage of the situation. However, he is confused because it's her who's holding on to him. He tells her not to worry, as they were truly safe. After letting him go, she asks if there's an exit nearby. He replies that he doesn't know, as the place was meant to trap intruders with a formation that prevented people from exploring and flying, deceiving their senses. Since flying didn't work, most just waited for help. Suddenly she shouts that they were the only ones there, alone, waiting for help, and questions if he wasn't going to take advantage of the situation. He replies that she thought too much about that, when suddenly she notices a small rat and screams in fear, jumping on the MC. She asks how he could take advantage of someone's fear. He tries to argue that she was the one who jumped on him, but she continues, saying she was just a disciple, not a slave. He tells her not to overreact as the rat was already gone and asks her to let go. After letting go, she comments that she's very afraid of rats. He tells her to hurry up and help search for an exit since they couldn't stay there forever. She replies that she would wait for help because it was too dangerous to explore a dark place with a man. He understands and begins walking, leaving her behind. Suddenly she hears a noise and, terrified, jumps on his back. The MC yells at her to let go already because that noise was just the wind, asking if she was also afraid since this was the third time. Embarrassed, she says she wouldn't go with him and would stay there waiting for help. However, when she realizes he was actually leaving her behind, she shouts for him to wait and starts running after him. Upon entering a cave, she begins holding on to his clothes. He asks if it was really necessary to hold on like that. She replies that her teacher said men and women should maintain some distance to avoid unwanted feelings. He is confused, wondering what she's talking about. Suddenly, he spots something and comments that it seemed they had finally found the exit. However, she asks what that place was, with so many stone pillars, and questions if all they had to do was pass through them. Yang replies that's not the point, because the problem was how they would cross the infernal sky meridian matrix. She explains that, according to legends, this matrix was abnormal. If they stepped on the wrong pillar, all the others would collapse at once. He looks at her and realizes Mu Xin had some knowledge. She says she's a fan of matrices but never exaggerated her skills. She tries to figure out a way to cross it, and after stepping on several pillars, notices the matrix changes depending on the pillar one jumps on, requiring recalculations to reach a safe position. Only then could they cross it. Suddenly, she notices he's walking and asks what he's doing. He comments that he's getting ready because all he needs to do is jump. She tells him not to be impulsive, as he could die with a single mistake, and suggests waiting for the sisters since they should come to rescue them. He says he won't wait, and that if she wants, she can stay. Suddenly, she grabs him and comments that she was ready. After all, she was his disciple, and her role was to help him. He sighs and says that even though she was so shy, she always held on to him tightly. Mu Xin feels awkward. The MC comments that it would be quick, and with an incredible leap, he jumps onto the stone pillars, asking her not to move and to hold on tight. As he steps on one pillar, he asks if he missed it. She is impressed and questions how it was possible since he had jumped over 8 pillars at once. However, he shouts that he will increase the speed. She screams, saying it was impossible because you could only jump on the correct pillar, and without finding it, it would take hundreds of jumps. He ignores her and continues quickly leaping across the pillars. She comments that she was getting dizzy, and as he performed several jumps, she screams that she was going to fall. Suddenly, they reach the other side, and he tells her they had already arrived. She, still holding on to him, asks if they had already crossed because it seemed impossible. The book described that it was necessary to analyze the matrix thousands of times to cross. He says he did some calculations and had already predicted all possibilities before jumping. She says he must be joking. He comments that his matrix skills were at their peak and that his passive abilities were sufficient to handle it. She remarks that this was not possible and that she would only come down when she felt safe. He asks her to come down and questions why she thought it wasn't safe there. After all, there was a door right in front of them. Upon descending and analyzing the door, she comments that it seemed familiar and wonders if it was possible. The MC comments that it was the Dragon Imprisonment Formation door. Mu Xin says that historically, the only way to solve the demonic matrix was to press the door 18,632 times, and a single mistake would cause the gate to close forever. Only 3 people in the world had managed to escape this matrix alive. He looks disappointed. She notices and asks what happened, urging him not to be impulsive because it was a high-level matrix used in battles. Once it closed, the entire space would be sealed, and they would be completely doomed. He sighs and gets ready. She tells him to wait, and asks how he planned to get through it. He comments that he didn't know. She questions if he was going to mess it up again. The MC says the calculation was simple, but one person pressing each stone over 10,000 times would get tired before finishing. She, distressed, says he couldn't just break it, because only masters who control the past and present could do that. He says there was another way to pass without using his brain, then punches the door. Outside, the sisters are standing in front of a cliff, and one of them comments that it would take years to create a hole to save them. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurs. They are astonished to see the size of the hole created by the blast. Suddenly, the MC emerges and says they had finally come out. She comments that his method of breaking the formation was terrifying. He advises her to be more careful the next time she's cleaning. With ease, he leaps to the ground. The younger sister asks her elder sister if that's how their great rescue plan would end. Sushu says he was a freak, punching such a hard wall with his bare hands. Ling thinks she must follow the Lord for the rest of her life. Sometime later, in the Shicheng district, holding several books, the MC comments that this world didn't have otaku games, but fortunately had novels to read, and he didn't expect a book recommended by teenagers to be so good. However, he realizes that today was the second day of the trial period as disciples, and that he had already seen all the books. In total, there were at least 60 rooms to clean. Suddenly, a group of men comments that they were going to take a look around there, and upon seeing him, they say he looked quite foolish. The MC, still looking at a book, comments that he was reading a biography of Yan Niang. and that it was really good, but he is torn about which one to take, Yan Niang, Leng Feng, or Xiao Yu, when suddenly, a big man bumps into him. Confused by the situation, the MC apologizes, but the man, irritated, questions what he was looking at and says that he simply didn't pay attention around him and ended up bumping into him, asking what he should do about it. Yang bends down to pick up the book that fell on the floor and apologizes for what happened, but the man steps on the book and tells him to wait. Another man, with a toothpick in his mouth, says that he hit his brother and, because of that, he was seriously injured, so a simple apology wouldn't solve anything. The man who was supposedly hit starts pretending to be in pain. People around comment that the young man was very unlucky because these gangsters were at it again. They usually targeted weaker people near the bookstore. The MC, confused, asks what they were saying. The man with the toothpick in his mouth says that if he gives them money, they'll let it slide. The MC responds, asking what would happen if he didn't want to give anything. The people observing the situation comment that he really was an idiot and that this was the end for him, that he would suffer greatly at the hands of the gangsters. A little girl asks if it wouldn't be better to help him, but a man with bangs says it was better not to get involved with the four of them, as they were all mid-level martial artists, and they wouldn't stand a chance against them. An old man realizes that this was bad, and worse still, there was no patrol nearby. The man with the toothpick in his mouth replies that he really didn't expect the young man to be brave enough to give such an answer, and pointing behind him, he says that this would happen if he refused to give the money. The MC looks and notices that one of the men was breaking a small board with a punch. The people around are impressed by the gangster's strength. The man with the toothpick says that if he still refuses, the next punch will be in his face. He then punches the air, creating a small gust of wind that destroys a nearby wall. The old man trembles in fear, thinking that this man was really very strong. The MC replies that if that was all, he could do it too. The gangsters begin to laugh, saying that he really thought it was a joke, when suddenly one of them notices that his sword had disappeared and wonders where it went. The MC, holding the sword, comments that he wasn't lying and that he was really capable of doing that. He tells them to watch, then begins to bend the sword with his hands, and within seconds, it breaks. The gangsters are horrified and question how that was possible. Yang says that he could also do that with his fists, and punching the air, tells them to look again. An explosion 1,000 times larger than the previous one destroys the nearby wall. The gangsters are stunned, and the people around in disbelief say that the young man was immortal, and that knowledge really is power. One of them asks to be pinched, because it must be a dream. The MC sighs and, with his fists clenched, orders them to give him everything they have, and he would consider leaving them alone. The gangsters, trembling, question how he was so strong and call him a monster, running away while shouting not to let him catch them. Confused by their escape, he comments that it really was a great idea, but the biggest mistake they made was messing with him. He gets ready to chase them when suddenly, one of his boots comes off his foot. Irritated, he picks it up, starts spinning it, and says that no one would escape. When he throws it, the boot hits one of them and ricochets, hitting the other gangsters until it strikes one squarely in the mouth. As he approaches, the MC asks how they would compensate him for dirtying his shoe. One of them quickly gets up and with a trembling voice apologizes, calling him a hero and offers everything they have. Yang says that it wasn't enough and that they really needed to take a punch from him. The man, in shock, faints. The MC, showing the middle finger, comments that they were useless and decides to see what they had of value to compensate for the time lost. The old man says he didn't expect him to be so strong, while the man with bangs comments that the gangsters wouldn't cause trouble for a long time after this. The little girl, enchanted, says that she will help him grab the books so he can see which one helped him gain this immense strength. Yang grabs a bag of coins but realizes there are only a few and says they probably spent it all, leaving just that little bit. Spinning the bag, he comments that it was better to forget about it, as he got 2 new swords and a little money, so he would give them a discount. However, as he approaches to grab his book, he questions what the little girl was doing. She replies that she was helping to gather the books, and after collecting them all, asks what they were. He quickly becomes shocked. She hands over the books and asks if the hero normally read all those perverted books. After taking them all, he simply runs off without saying a word. The little girl, confused, doesn't understand. Later, while the MC was sleeping, Happy asks him why he was sleeping in the library. He responds that earlier he met some very poor people, but he notices the sun is setting and it's time to run. The bird asks what he was going to do. With a sly smile, he comments that he finally found the solution to get them to leave. Happy, disappointed, says he was acting like a villain. Sometime later, while watching Su Shu chop wood, the bird comments that she seemed so simple but never gave up. Yang responds that it didn't matter. The point was that she never used qi to chop the wood, and maybe she hadn't reached the 6th level of martial arts. With a smile, he says he's going to check her pulse, and when he does, he might realize she was deceiving him. The bird comments that his tone sounded evil. The MC then calls her over and asks if she could stop working for a moment because he needed to confirm something with her. She's surprised to see him, but quickly grabs her own arm, trying to feel the qi. Embarrassed, she says it's the first time she's ever held a man's hand. Suddenly, the other women wonder what they're doing. He thinks and realizes there are many people nearby, so it's better to change places. He begins to pull her along, and she says it felt like a famous romance scene. She comments that cooking was a game, and the master was going to force her to do a job no girl would do. When they reach a secluded place, he concentrates to feel her qi. She, confused, wonders if this was a signal for her to kiss him, thinking the master was moving too fast. She hesitates but refuses, believing everything was moving too quickly. However, he realizes that her problem was concentration because her qi scattered as soon as it was used, and her level was at the 6th stage. With no other option, he comments that he needed to be part of the process and, before proceeding, would like to ask a simple question. Couldn't they start with a hug, since she had never had this kind of contact with a man? He is confused, trying to understand what she meant. She says the master was very impatient, and that, even though she was so beautiful that she attracted him, she knew that a small sacrifice was inevitable living in his home. She understands, but this is her first time, so she asks him to give her time to prepare. If necessary, she would be willing to offer herself to the patriarch for the sake of everyone, even though she had developed some feelings for him, asking him to guide her slowly because she was so young. The MC comments that he had no idea what she was talking about. Embarrassed, she explains that she was referring to the night service and asks if he could give her a few days to prepare. Suddenly, Ling appears and asks what nonsense Su Shu was saying, as the patriarch wasn't that kind of person. Ling inquires if the patriarch had really asked her to sell her body so they could all stay. He asks what kind of person she thought he was. The little girl says she understands because she was an expert at making this kind of mistake. He then explains that he only wanted to see if she was suitable for cultivation. The older sister realizes that he noticed Su Shu had trouble controlling her qi and asks her to apologize. Su Shu thanks him and asks if she still needed to finish this. He asks her to forget the topic, as it was a personal issue of hers, and decides to talk about the opportunity to become regular disciples. He asks them all to prepare for the entrance exam that will take place tomorrow. They get excited and begin shouting with joy. Later, in the prison, he tells her to eat quickly because the new disciples also wanted to eat. The nine-tailed demon queen, while eating, asks why he wouldn't leave her alone, as she could eat by herself. He refuses. She questions if he was serious about putting them in the entrance exam. He comments that their cultivations meet the requirements, so whether they fail or succeed will only depend on fate. She mentions that the Wuji sect exam, which hadn't happened in hundreds of years, suddenly started and warns him to be careful. He tells her not to be so dramatic, as they only had to climb the mountain and reach the top, something very simple. She retorts that the Wuji sect is an ancient sect, and a mountain would be more than just a mountain. She believes something really big is going to happen to them this time. He tells her to stop talking nonsense and eat quickly because he needed to sleep. She starts eating fast and asks why he wouldn't let her participate in the exam, as she would also like to be a disciple. He replies that she should stop trying to deceive him because if he let her out, being the demon queen, the world would fall into chaos again. She says, playfully, that even though she was kind, she wouldn't teach the disciples anything bad. The only thing she wanted to teach was how to be a woman. She comments that he seems to understand nothing about women, and before finishing her sentence, she falls asleep. He tells her not to exaggerate. Suddenly, she wakes up and says that after everything, he asked for advice on how to guide them, and she wouldn't have mentioned it if it hadn't happened to her a long time ago. However, she realizes he's no longer there and curses him, questioning if he went to get food. She begins to emanate her wrath, saying that this prison wouldn't be able to contain her for long and that she would definitely get out of there. The next day, at the Wuji sect entrance exam site, on a spiritual mountain located in a specific group of veins right behind the Wuji sect, while they were walking, a voice comments that the patriarch slept the whole night and let them climb the mountain by themselves. Happy then says that if they climb the mountain on their own, they will pass the exam. They question if the test to enter the sect was simply climbing a mountain. Su Shu comments that even though he's a martial arts master, the patriarch always wakes up late and has no discipline whatsoever. The little one disagrees, remembering seeing him last night walking around the Fury Mountain. Ling asks if they knew that the mountain was a place full of demons and that he should be the one preventing them from invading the world. The Night Guardian, the hero who protects humans from the demon invasion. 70% of the world had been taken over by demons, and in the untamed lands, these domains were still expanding. Fortunately, there are heroes who protect the human world. The little one, with a smile, thinks that the Wuji sect is located near these lands for a reason. The older sister reflects that the patriarch was a graceful person, a night guardian, and truly a great hero. She comments that even if they had to risk their lives, they would enter the sect and follow the Lord to the death. All the other sisters shout in agreement. However, Happy remembers that the MC only slept outside and ended up getting lost. He asked for her help, saying he would freeze to death, and begged her to take him to the sect. Even so, he became an important person to the little one, and it was better to forget that fact and just let them believe whatever they wanted. Sometime later, in a matter of seconds, a mysterious person approaches them unnoticed and tells them to wait, as he was also there for the entrance exam. They wonder who this strange person in odd clothes was and if there was another person who would participate. Thus, the MC thinks that the nine-tailed fox had said the test was dangerous, so it would be better for him to secretly protect them. Ling says that if she really wanted to accompany them, she should remove the hood. He becomes anxious, but Happy quickly intervenes and explains that she was a girl the patriarch considered talented, but who was naturally shy and afraid of meeting new people. So, they should understand the situation. The MC, frustrated, wonders where that damn bird got the idea that he was a woman and promises to deal with it later. Su Shu comments that if she were that shy, she wouldn't be able to get a boyfriend. Yang, in disguise, replies that she didn't want a boyfriend, but tries to disguise it by saying that she was too young and therefore didn't think about it. The little one notices that she was very tall. He responds that it was because she had long legs. Happy then tells them to proceed with the test. One of the sisters comments that the mountain was very big, but Ling warns them not to underestimate it because something was wrong, and so she would go ahead, asking them all to follow carefully. They begin to jump. The bird, watching them, thinks they had the qualifications and character to enter the sect. However, while jumping over the mountain, the little one asks what was wrong with Su Shu. The MC notices the conversation between the two. Su Shu replies that she was thinking about quitting the test. The little one scolds her, telling her to stop talking nonsense, because although it seemed strict, the patriarch was a good person. Upon hearing the conversation, the MC thinks he wasn't that good. Su Shu says she didn't think she was suitable for cultivation and that they all had a place to stay so she could leave in peace. The little one insists that the master would help her. Su Shu comments that she would think about it and that maybe it was better to return to her poor family, as she also knew it wasn't easy for the patriarch. He becomes emotional upon hearing this and starts crying, thinking that finally someone understood him. Later, while crossing the valley, one of them shouts that it was better to reunite with everyone first. In seconds, everyone reaches the top of one of the mountains, leaving the MC last. When he gets there, he realizes that Ling was quiet. The little one asks why they had stopped, as the distance from the cliff didn't seem large enough for them not to make the jump. One of the sisters explains that, except for Ling, everyone who tries will fail because this cliff was strange. As soon as they jump, the wind throws them off. The little one questions if it wasn't normal for a cliff to have wind. Ling asks them to try again. They understand and say they will do their best. Thus, two of them jump to try crossing the cliff, but the force of the wind throws them back onto the mountain. Su Shu asks if they are okay. One of the sisters who tried to jump comments that the wind was very strange and that she thought her bones had frozen. She concludes that the Wuji sect was truly an ancient sect, and the entrance exam was much harder than they expected. The MC realizes that something bad was about to happen. Suddenly, the little one decides to try and says that she was very good at this. While one of the sisters asks her not to take the risk, she jumps using her power, and for a moment, manages to ignore the force of the wind. When reaching the middle of the distance, the sisters comment that she was really good at this and hope she could make it. However, suddenly, she is thrown back, and the others notice that the wind force has increased. Nevertheless, the little one falls into the cliff, and in seconds the MC runs to save her. However, quickly, Ling, with a jump, manages to save her in time. While holding her in her arms, she comments that it was really dangerous. The little one, in turn, says that it was very cold and that she was freezing.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and like the video. Thank you.